We start with thanks. Huge shout out to our one and only sponsor, because I don't think we're going to go down. I don't think they can be beaten as a company that we would fuck with. It'll be hard pressed. Like we've had so many companies reach out and want to partner with us. And like, I'm not going to lie to you, some of the money has been pretty good, but the people are shit. The products are shit.
Right.
So like, we definitely value you guys and your time. We would only sell things that we use. So I've been wearing Vivos in training for over a year now, and getting to know the people. It's like, hey, we fuck with this brand. So Vivo Barefoot, 100-day free trial. If you want to return them, fucking return them. 20% off. You go to vivobarefoot.com/RXD. That's Vivo, VIVO, barefoot, BARE, foot.com/RXD. You get access to their Barefoot Fundamental and online course. So if you want to learn a little bit more, I know a lot of you guys are coaches. I know a lot of you train people who would benefit from using footwear like this, especially in training and probably as they move on more so outside of the gym as well. Can't say enough good things about them. So guys, if you're looking to cop a new pair, maybe we put the J's on the back burner. You already have 17 pairs. Gino Suarez, I'm talking to you.
You don't want to crease them.
Right.
Training,
Dude,
right?
I can't with that shit. But if you don't want to crease a shoe, you cannot crease a Vivo. Did you know that? So great people, great products, great company, great message, great, they're sustainably made. If we're environment forward thinking, you don't have to worry about that. So all around great products, the only people that we fuck with. So hopefully that carries some weight after going almost 300 episodes and really karate chopping every single fucking sponsorship proposal that's come our way. So yeah, Vivo Barefoot. On the docket coming up at Prescript, Phil Smith's nutrition course is starting very shortly. So this is kind of last call for the course. If you guys are interested in learning the action items you can take to improve performance with a nutritional intervention, it's the only place to go. Phil Smith's he's the GOAT.
He's the man.
Yeah, if you guys are unfamiliar with Phil, he just hosted a webinar a few weeks ago. There's old podcast episodes with him. He's been on the show 3 times now. He's going to be heading up that course moving into the future. Him and Dwayne Jackson are our two-headed beast when it comes to nutrition education at Prescript. So really can't be beat, in my opinion. Without further ado,
Luke Tulloch.
Luke Tulloch, man, one of a kind. Really is one of a kind.
Yeah.
We've been lucky to have guests that are much more science oriented.
Right.
In the sense of analyzing and making actionable things that are in conventional research. And he's got to be one of the best at synthesization. He actually uses this phrase, which I really like, and I've been using it since I heard it, is kill the words.
Right.
Yeah. So his ability to say a lot with less, he just hits you with just idea concentrate, and his idea is to distill and distill and distill and distill. Had an unfortunate incident with his Instagram account. So guys, do go follow at Coach Luke Tulloch on Instagram. His previous account was deleted for no reason. And it wasn't some Bitcoin Finex trader bullshit, quick money scam. Just an interesting guy, interesting perspective, very, very calm.
Yeah, very composed.
Felt my blood pressure dropped when listening to him talk, which I needed. Currently lives in Sweden, is from Australia originally. Just, I don't know, whatever it is, he gets it, right? Like, he seems like he's the guy that's got life figured out. Because a lot of times fitness can just poison the fucking well of your mind, and can put things into context, obviously when it comes to research, but putting the broader scope of fitness and health into context within, the context of his life. Mm-hmm. Such an admirable character, such a good dude, so generous with his time. So 2 things, follow him on Instagram. Trust me, if you like fitness education, you'll love the stuff Luke puts out. Humble, he will go back and change his stance on things based off his experience and prevailing research. So just an all-around great dude. We're lucky as an industry to have him. So give him a follow on Instagram. Guys, hope you enjoy the episode. Check out our friends at Vivo Barefoot. Cop yourself a pair, 20%. Thanks to the boys. Saw that discount for you. So vivobarefoot.com/RX. And that's it. Enjoy the show. Lundy, hit it.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
I think the nice part with you, though, is you've been probably the most perennial value provider of content in the fitness space. Like, I've never heard anyone say a bad word about you. I've heard a lot of people say bad things about me. But, like, because you do the research side of things in a with an air of humility that I don't see very often. There's a few people that come to mind, but you're definitely at the top of the list. It's almost like as he sips the IPA or whatever. There's just a very objective lens. It's like, look, man, this just is what it is. I said some things based off this. My interpretations changed. No big deal.
Yeah. Look, like, I think that is playing into my hands now because there's been fucking like a decade of that, right? But it's sort of like longer term that works out because then it builds trust and people know you and they're like, you know, like you said, I think, is enemy too strong a word, or like people are talking shit about me or something like that. But, you know, shorter term, like one of the advice I got, like I've done some business like courses and stuff in the past, and like one of the dudes had grown his Instagram to like 100K plus or whatever. And he's like, dude, seriously, my tactic was just find a topic, go fucking hard on one side of it, be super polarizing because you get tons of attention, your shit gets shared, you get lots of comments. And I was like, yeah, that's not me. So he's like, well, the way you're doing it is obviously people trust you and stuff, but you know, it's not going to like blow up your account or anything.
What does that count for?
Yeah, who cares about trust?
You might be able to sleep at night, but
Yeah, I guess you have values and morals.
Yeah, but the bank account, I mean, come on. You know, so anyway, I think that served me well because now I was like, fuck, my account's gone. I reached out to a few people and said, hey, do you mind helping me out? And it was like, got tons of support. So fuck, it's awesome.
Have you struggled with like I hate using the word. What's another word for misinformation?
Disinformation.
Oh Christ, that's almost worse. Thanks for that.
But bullshit.
The bullshit. There you go. Thank you for Killianizing that for me. Have you struggled with? And I don't know if it's an emergence, a reemergence, or I'm just tired of being in this industry. But it seems of late there's like a increase in frequency and tone and pitch of the amount of bullshit. Did you ever grow tired of it, or can you insulate yourself from it and just kind of cruise around like PubMed and read your stuff and synthesize the information? Or are there points where you're just like, God, Liver King, what the fuck are we doing here?
Bro, how good is Liver King?
He's great. Big fan.
He's securing the bread, though. He's breaded.
He's somehow done it. He's cracked it, man. Imagine you could just fucking trend up that hard and go just take over Instagram.
Yeah,
it's
he's
fucking
jaundiced at this point.
Yeah.
He's not going to last long. But I look forward to seeing him return to the earth and like give back all of this drifting back to the planet, dude, right?
I don't think that's gonna be salted ground. Nothing's gonna grow in that acetate bath. You're gonna be able to see his grave. It's gonna be all dead grass,
radioactive.
Yeah,
man.
just from the grapeseed oil or whatever the fuck Trends made it. But like, do you
so
struggle with it? Like, do you struggle because you seem the most level-headed? Like, I've become a lot better at not shooting back on Instagram and just being like, okay, what is the opportunity here? But that takes a lot of introspection, a lot of me yelling at these two guys instead. Yeah. But you seem to be very uninvolved, unbothered by the goings on of like, let's use the word peers lightly, but like peers in the industry.
Yeah, man. I think early on, like there were people out there who were, you know, those doctors that like write a low carb book and then it's like, dude, what the fuck? And then they get really deep down into it and stuff. I used to, you know, do my seminars and be like, this guy's full of shit and here's why, and I'm refuting it. And I realized like, I think there's actually like, it's now got a law sort of moniker attached to it, but the amount of effort it takes to refute bullshit is like 10 times the amount to actually create the bullshit in the first place. And I just don't have the fucking energy for it, bro. So I'm just so like, whatever. I couldn't be fucked like trying to refute all this shit out there, because at the end of the day, you know, like I'm in my little fucking world of people who I think put out at least some good information, and outside of that I kind of realized like, you know what, all of the kind of people who are putting out good information combined are maybe like 1% of the audience that fucking Men's Health and bodybuilding.com gets, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I couldn't be fucked trying to fight that battle. So I'm just going to like put out what I think is good information and, you know, let them come sort of thing. It was my approach.
Does part of that come from just like security of your place in the industry now? It's like, you know, you have your people, like, you know, or is it because you're, you know, when we were last in Sydney, is it because like you have a life outside of fitness? Like which of those, or both? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's both because, I mean, I've been there where, you know, my entire personality is founded in like how much I squat and like, you know, how big fucking pants I have to buy because my quads don't fit them or whatever. And it's like a lot of trainers end up like that. It's like, hey, you were good at sports in school. You get into fucking PT because you're not good at anything else. You love training. Yeah. You just hang out with other trainers. You talk about how much you fucking squat. Like that's all you do, right? And I was quickly like, fuck me. Like I'm working alongside people that are like 40 years old and they're still like this. What the fuck is going on here? So I thought, yeah, shit, I got to do some other stuff. And I'm a naturally sort of curious guy. And I agree. I think it is a little bit like, hey, there are people out there. There's your Lane Nortons and stuff that are going to go after every quack that they can find and cause themselves a ton of stress and argue with people in comments. Hey, have that corner of the internet. And I'm going to be over here in my little corner. And hopefully I'll just be like The Rock with the stream kind of going past it. And that's cool. I'm totally sweet with that. There's other people out there who can take the mantle of fighting the good fight or whatever.
Have you had that ever come to your doorstep? Like, you seem unimpeachable is a word that comes to mind. Like, academically and integral, or from an integrity perspective, unimpeachable. Does anyone dare go toe-to-toe with you? Or are you just that dismantling where it's just like, okay, like, let's look at the facts, or, oh, no, I understand. Like, does anyone come in and just try and, like, pick a fight with you? That would be academically terrifying.
You are too kind. Not really. I think because, like, either I'm like, if we're gonna debate something, it's like either they are not coming into it with like in good spirits, they're not participating in good spirits, or it's like we're probably gonna agree with each other on something or kind of understand where we disagree, and then it's all cool. You know what I mean? So I think from that perspective, I have had a few people kind of really try to like argue with me or something like that, and I'm totally cool with that. But as soon as someone starts participating like disingenuously, I'm out. Like I just couldn't be fucked. And I'm happy to say what I need to say, and anyone can look at that and decide whether I'm right or wrong. That's cool. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to argue with someone if they're going to like move goalposts or misinterpret what I say or straw man me or whatever. There's just no point, because you can't change someone's mind unless they're willing to have it changed. So that's kind of my approach.
I think, like, going back to what you said, Luke, just like right now about this idea about people participating disingenuously, or you know, if someone does have their own frame of reference and enough information, they'll probably agree with you on some things. Something I find in this industry, and it kind of goes to what you're saying, is this idea that at the top, if you're sitting with like-minded people who are, you know, no offense, probably equally as smart, or in my case, usually smarter than me, most people agree that just pretty much everything ends up being the same. Like, it's okay for it to be different, you know? And I think that's where you see these people, you know, not naming any names, that sit at the bottom of the barrel, and it's exhausting to watch them wait for someone else to have something to say, to find relevance again by saying it's not true. Where it's like, half the bullshit I see, like even like we're making fun of Liver King, I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, there's probably merit to eating organ meat and doing trend. Totally. Like those are both great things. And I just carry on with my day, right? And I just find it's the great like fat from the cream on the internet for me. It's like I know who I can talk to by the people that just kind of shrug and go, yeah, probably.
Yep.
There's just no energy.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, I think when you get into the weeds with a lot of training and nutrition and lifestyle stuff, it's like there aren't a lot of absolutes, and so you can kind of I don't know. There's no way to just go, this is 100% true no matter what.
It's how many questions do you want to ask, right? Like, how far do we have to go for this to be an absolute,
How deep
right?
into this rabbit hole are we willing to go before we go, listen, man, this doesn't fucking matter. Just like get in the gym and train hard. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the unique thing about you.
Yes.
It's like you're so sleeper jacked that it's like where do you want to take this? You want to take it to the research, you want to take it to the mats, you want to take it to the squat rack, you want to take it to the selfie mirror, you want to take it to the posing room. Like, he's got you.
Yeah.
Like, he's got you dead to fucking rights. How much does that frustrate you? Because, like, I definitely, from an academic perspective, your interpretations of, like, the current tone of research on subjects is one that I tend to probably more than anyone else's. And I'm going to be honest, one of the reasons I do that, outside of knowing you personally, is the fact that you are so jacked, right? Like,
Yeah.
but no, like, how many
Seriously.
people, like, you talked about trainers, you know, they're not good. They're good at sports, but they're not good at anything else. So they talk about their squats till they're 40 or whatever. But, like, how many people on the research side are kind of the exact opposite? They're not good at sports. They don't have a good squat. So they just talk about confidence intervals until they're 40, right? Is it frustrating to you to see other people who pursue a more academic approach and not personally pursue the application of that information?
Yeah, I think that is frustrating. Like, I don't need someone to be jacked to get something from them, but I also think that, like, at the end of the day, when it comes to applying something to an individual, it's just with what we have from a research perspective, you know, let's be perfectly fucking honest here. Like, health and science research compared to other fields is pretty fucking atrocious. Like,
Yeah.
You don't have sample sizes. You don't have, you know, the chance of a type 2 error is, like, pretty fucking high. There's just not that much statistical power. So with that said, like, when you're dealing with a fucking biological being where we've got all of these different variables, dynamic variables interacting with each other, you got to be able to actually, like, put it into practice, right? You got to, like, produce it in a person. And that means that you can't just say, well, X applies across the board to everybody. So I do think that there has to be an element of, like, okay, yes, I do know the science. You need to know physiology to really be great at this, in my opinion. But, like, that doesn't stop there. You have to actually put it into practice. You have to find something that works. And at the end of the day, you also have to get in there and work hard and be patient. Like, that's what's going to get you the results. So I do find that pretty frustrating, but I also find it really annoying, which seems to be happening a lot lately when, like, I just made a fucking post about like a training volume sweet spot and trying to find, like, where on that inverted U you should lie with training volume. And this guy going, like, yeah, you know, well, you know, Jay Cutler and Dorian Yates, like, trained really differently and they both got really jacked. It's like, oh, you mean two of the biggest, most extreme outliers in human history? Okay, yeah, cool.
And between
that frustrates me as well.
And between those two people is probably the sweet spot of that volume.
Yeah,
Right? It's like it's
yeah,
an upside down U. There was a lot on one side and not a lot on the other, and the sweet spot is between. Going back to that point about being frustrated about people that aren't jacked and talk about research, my thing is, it seems like you'd mentioned, disingenuous and moving of the goalposts. When I see, like, small, weak people science talk fitness, it seems like they couldn't do a science thing well, so they came over here. Like,
Right.
why are you in this industry? Like, all of us in this room are here because we liked probably fucking lifting weights at the beginning of this and then wanted to do it better or wanted to make money at it so they didn't have to hang off the side of a building. It's like, why are you here if you don't even work out? Like, just get out of the way.
Yeah,
That's
because
so
doing
true.
research and development for major companies is
It was
difficult
too
and you're
hard
not
because you
smart
had to be
enough.
a real engineer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But identifying the confidence interval or P scores of electromyelography studies is way easier than working in an actual lab.
Also, because you're arguing with 99% of the industry that's here to lift weights, and you're
Right.
the one guy who is here to read books, right?
Yeah. I just find, like, you and Bagheera had a really good takeaway from last weekend. And that was, like, that intensity is the unifying factor in a lot of these arguments.
Yeah.
Right. And people who don't train to that level or diet to that level or do cardio to that level, whatever that level is, don't understand that meta principle of putting all this research into perspective. It's like, this only works if you, and I hate to say like if you work, but like there's a certain intensity you have to reach for these principles to actually play out.
Yeah. Well, like even like Lundy could attest to, and like I grew up before any of this, never working out and playing music, but it's like I remember playing in hardcore bands, and it's like it didn't matter what amplifier you had, unless you turned it up loud enough, it didn't sound like the amplifier it was supposed to sound like, right? That's intensity.
Right.
It's like it's got to be at 9 or it sounds like shit. And it's how people look.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that's where like the debates stem from, is they're just hovering around this 7 intensity, like because they're usually lazy arguments, made by lazy people. It's like, do you do anything well? Do you do anything well? Do you try at all, or is it just because it's always like the fat lazy guy making the fat lazy guy argument?
Yeah, or it's like it's that moving of the goalpost, right? It's like they can't squat what Luke squats, so they're like, well, squat's not efficient. This is better. Because it takes 45 minutes to set up, and none of us in the room are going to do that. We're just going to go barbell squat. It's like, well, that's cool. No one's doing that exercise. Like, there's no argument against it. No one cares to do it.
Right, yeah. You've made a new game rather than winning the game.
The 45-minute lat pull-down is better than my lat pull-down. I don't want to do the 45-minute lat pull-down.
I love lat pull-downs. They've become my new favorite thing, just as an act of rebellion. Two-handed, straight bar, lat pull-down, no single arm stuff.
I'm gonna arch my upper back.
Oh, man.
I'm gonna lean back.
Stick it to just rip the whole stock.
Yeah.
Use straps and a belt.
And a gym pin.
I'll use sponges for grips.
I'll get you to hold my feet down.
Fuck yeah. Dude, I just can't. With like the new state. And it's just, I haven't seen any just like Olympia, like, oh my God, look at these lats on this guy. But it's just been like, you know, it's the job security through obscurity in this industry just kills me, where like the real goalpost is so objective. It's so objective. It is like, it's subjective in the interpretation of like, man, this guy looks huge, but it's also like the objectification. No, he's like 105 kilos shredded to the dick. Like, that's objective. You know what I mean? It's just it's political. You know what the term gerrymandering means? Okay. Do you know what the term gerrymandering?
I always thought it was gerrymandering. So
gerrymandering is like so let's say I get into a political office locally, and I know I have a constituent of conservatives, let's say, that's just outside my political boundary. I'm going to redraw the boundary. So I'm going to gerrymander the jurisdiction so I have more people to vote for me. That's what fitness on the internet has become. Is like a gerrymandering of things that matter, when it's like really there's one thing that matters.
Just measure your arms.
Measure
your arms. Yeah. I don't, and this is actually a question I have for you, Luke, because I'm a huge fan of you, is the shift in bodybuilding to moving the goalpost from the size of your arms PPS. To fractional plates on the Prime Fitness machine.
Plates per side.
As a powerlifter, I don't really understand this, because I've never measured my quads to know how much I can squat. I don't know why I would measure how much I can bicep curl to know how big my arms are. So I'm interested in your interpretation.
Yeah, dude. Look, I don't know. Don't get me started on that shit. But
no. That's why we have the podcast. This podcast should be getting people started.
Oh, man. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's getting to this point of like people worrying so much about like resistance curves and fucking whatever. I tell you how I got big quads, right? I fucking saw Tom Platz doing sets of 20 reps, and I thought, that's fucking cool. He's got big legs.
Yes.
And I tried to do the same thing, and I squatted until I threw up, and then I did it again and again and again, and my legs got really big. And I just kept fucking doing that. Like, there wasn't any real science to it, to be perfectly honest. It's just like, man, I try and train to the highest intensity that I could, and I just kept trying to do that, and that takes care of progressive overload. And then you're fucking done, pretty much. It's like, I think bodybuilding, I actually view powerlifting and bodybuilding as like really, really similar.
Yes.
The way that I train people anyway, because I think ultimately the goal is like roughly the same.
Yeah.
The bodybuilding, you just don't do, squat, bench, and deadlift for a single on a comp day. But like a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do is the same. And I kind of feel like I take a mentality of a power lifter where I'm just trying to like fucking go hard on like lift some heavy shit, do it really hard. That's going to provide the tension I need to grow the muscle. I don't have anything against trying to find, some way of increasing it or maybe improving the efficiency a bit by maybe, changing an angle or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think people are just obsessing over that way too much. Like, by the time you're an IFBB Pro, okay, cool. I get that you might want to bias some particular set of fibers, or I don't know, for longevity purposes, you need to like adjust various variables or something like that. But the majority of people that follow me on Instagram, for example, are sort of intermediates, and they've gotten past that beginner stage, and now they're kind of getting into like, oh shit, like I don't just have to count my macros, I could start playing with nutrient timing. And okay, it's not, I've learned how to squat and bench press and all this sort of stuff. What's the next thing for me? And they're now moving into this zone of just like worrying about trying to include like the correct exercise selection for like glutes or something. And it's like, just fucking squat and deadlift and you'll hit your glutes. Like, you cannot do that without using your glutes, dude. Like, you don't have to worry about it so much. So I do get frustrated with that, but I can kind of see that there are people out there that are curious and they want to explore what's optimal. And I have to say that I was like this, right? I used to be like really into the supplements, and these are the mechanisms and this is what we can do with it. And I think that stuff's really cool, but I just don't think it's practical. I just don't think it matters at the end of the day, to be perfectly honest. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I think I came full circle. Like, I got really interested. I'm still interested in mechanisms and all of this stuff. And the theory, I think, is really fascinating because it does open some doors. But how many people is that applicable to? Like, nearly zero. So what are you going to do with that?
When you talk about coming full circle, you do something that I don't see anyone else have the humility to do, is I was wrong. I was wrong about this. And you'll put up a post, be like, I used to think this, but now after, coming full circle, I think this. What are some like major ones that, and I hate the idea of myth busting in the fitness industry. I hate that idea of hacking. It's like, no, you just probably have a better understanding of physiology, right? That's what hacking is. Biohacking is just not putting coffee up your ass. It's understanding physiology, right? What are some ones that you personally have changed your slant on, your view on, your take on? And what are some ones, bless you, Lundy, what are some ones that you see most commonly that you're like, oh man, just give it a few years and you'll see the light and you'll start to see it this way? So what are ones that you personally have changed on and the industry needs to change on?
Well, I kind of view things in like a hierarchical fashion, and I think a lot of the stuff that I used to be really focused on is like super low on the hierarchy now, right? So let's say from a training perspective, I'd be really hyped on things like time under tension. I'd be really hyped on like really being finicky with my rest periods so I could try and maximize the hormonal response to training, things of that nature. And now I'm kind of a bit like, you know what, that stuff is potentially important. It has some subtleties to it, but it's so far down on the priority list that probably 99% of people are not even going to end up touching that. So now it's definitely come full circle on that one. And some of the nutrition stuff is probably the most egregious. So like massive focus on supplements, like spending a lot of money on different supplements because I thought that was pretty cool. I loved looking at the mechanisms like I mentioned in the research. Now I fucking take some fish oil sometimes and that's about it. And maybe some creatine, right? And the other nutrition stuff that I really was into was like the low carb approach and really trying to manipulate my carbohydrate timing around workouts and all this kind of stuff. But I was like really, really into it. Like it was the only fucking thing that mattered. And then I discovered like, oh, if it fits your macros, I can just do whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. And because I was like really active as a trainer and a lot of muscle, it's like, hell yeah, I can just eat fucking 5,000 calories of whatever the fuck I want. This is heaven. This is so good. Go full on deep into that. And then more recently, I'm kind of like, hey, actually, you know what? Yeah, the nutrient timing that I was into before, not so important, but I do actually think that there's something to it now in the current literature. So it's kind of like, I think it's taught me the lesson that, you know, I might change my mind on something, but I might even kind of change it back slightly again in the future as well. And I think that's kind of taught me that lesson of like, you know, you say humility. I think it's embarrassment. I think it's embarrassment that I used to say some shit and be like, fuck, I think I just people were paying me a lot of money, and I told them the wrong thing for like years, and now I realize what a chode I was being, and I'm going back.
Where's that one, then? Missed that. It's a word we didn't know we needed until we had it.
Oh, now we got it.
But he's even humble about his humility. Yeah. Oh, fuck this guy. God, seriously. But how much of that changing of opinion has changed with your, like, has your goals in training changed? Obviously, like,
I used to care very much about squatting as much as I possibly could. And then I cared about getting my legs as big as I could possibly get them. And I still like that stuff. But now I'm back to playing some rugby. So I want to get really good at that. And when you can't move your legs without creating a huge amount of friction between your thighs, that's not ideal for like running, right? So I think the definitely the muscle size kind of things come down a little bit now, and I'm a little bit more involved with like a bit of force generation in the gym, but also doing some more athletic stuff, getting into some different planes of motion other than sagittal and that sort of thing. So that's definitely changed, man, for sure. But I kind of miss being super jacked and super lean, but at the end of the day, it's pretty cool to be able to actually move properly as well. And also I have a newborn now, so like training time is just so much more valuable to me. So yeah, you got to try and be efficient too.
Well, I'd love to get your take on that as you transition back into like more sport. I hate to use the term sport specific, because I don't know, I feel like that's really been taken under the wing of the fitness industry. Like strength and conditioning has been a cool Instagrammable thing in the last, 5 years or so, and not without its faults and not without its misinterpretations of the research that's out there. Outside of a conventional fitness perspective of like putting on muscle, leaning out, better body composition, what have you seen in the more strength conditioning sports performance realm on the research side that sort of has you raising an eyebrow going, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, I think something that I find a little frustrating about strength and conditioning world and sort of sports specific training is that it suffers heavily from people going a little bit too far down the rabbit hole in terms of like what you're doing in the gym definitely matters, but playing your sport and doing activities that look like your sport is what matters the most. And so I think it's pretty easy to get in and be like, hey, maybe we're going to do some particular type of training to try and shift fiber type characteristics or something like that, when it's like, well, if you just trained like what you need to do in the sport, that shit's going to happen automatically anyway, man. So I think like in the gym, you could start being like, well, I'm doing this because it's specific for that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm more of the type that's like, well, let me get in and like, I'll get my squat up and then that'll be enough. And then I can go out and do a bunch of sprints and run some lines and fucking run into people. And then I'll get better at that as well. So I'm really wary of exposing myself to too much of that S&C information and getting some of that shit started in my head and being like, well, maybe I could do this and maybe I can do that. When I know, because I haven't done anything remotely athletic for like a decade, that all I need to do is get out and fucking hit the pavement and start running again to like, so my calves don't feel like they're absolutely destroyed after a session of touch, So I have to be honest, I haven't been paying as much attention to the S&C literature and trying to apply it as literally just fucking getting out there and trying a few things that look similar to my sport. Hey, you need to run? Do some running. Hey, you need to sprint? Do some sprinting. You need to hit people? Hit the tackle bags, that sort of thing. So that's kind of been my approach. And the fact that I have no time to work out has basically just caused me to just strip down everything completely back. So like a leg session for me now is literally like I get in and spend like 5 minutes on the assault bike or whatever, and then it's like I squat for 4 sets, I do Romanians for 4 sets, and that's all I have fucking time for, and then I'm out of there. So I got to really make that shit count. So I found that pushing super hard on that stuff and being time efficient with it has actually been really refreshing, because in the past it would have been like, well, I'm in here for 2 hours doing a bunch of different variations and drop sets and this and that, So that's kind of where I'm at with it, to be honest. It's like super simple.
I think that's what a lot of people in fitness are missing. something to pull them away from fitness, to be able to create that hierarchy of decisions and of training variables that actually matters. Because it's like, hey, if you, like, I love the question, if you were trapped on a desert island, blank, right? Because it builds that severity. It's like, well, what's really important, right? Then you start to see, like, if you were trapped on a desert island, you can bring one lat exercise with you. It's probably going to be the pull-up or some sort of hinging movement, right? Some sort of like snatch grip RDL or something like that. And all of a sudden, the cable, single arm, wrap around, pull, extension, iliac, whatever the fuck, that doesn't make it to the island, right? What is it? Because that's always the interesting thing with you, is that you're an interesting person. Outside, like, fitness is just a thing that, and that's so, it must be so annoying for academics who spend all day trying to synthesize research and all day in the gym, and this guy just like shows up and literally goes, hold my beer, and then just like goes right into it and does a better job of summarizing it. Like, what is your day-to-day now, and how do you feel like the habits you have outside of just the fitness social media world actually help you synthesize information quicker or prioritize things? Like, what's a day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah, I'll talk you through day to day, but I think like there's tons of stuff that helps me in how I think. But I mean, right now I get up at like 4:35 and grab my daughter off my wife, and I got to look after her for like 3 hours or something while she sleeps. While she's doing that, I'll bust through some work. But in between, I have a bunch of different points throughout my day where I'm doing something that's completely unrelated to work, that is something that is intellectually stimulating and something that is interesting to me. So I'm into beer, I'm into coffee, I'm into food in general, I guess.
Right.
So I'll be one of those nerds who's like got the little chemistry experiment out with the coffee and trying to change all the variables and all that sort of shit. And I kind of like that because it stops me thinking about fitness so much. You know what I mean? It's still intellectually stimulating. But it gives me another dimension, and it's something that I can also connect to with clients if they're into the same sort of shit. So I do that, and then once my wife can take my daughter again, then I'm off to the gym. I've got a very small window to do that and come back. But there's a lot of walking and stuff in between. I don't have a car. I don't do any of that shit. So the walking in between gives me an opportunity to just literally have nothing going on, or bit of music, which I'm also a bit of a nerd about. Got my guitars, all that sort of stuff. So again, it's something that's intellectually stimulating, where I'm either having some quiet time where I can just fucking think about whatever I want to think about, or I got the music where I can kind of be intellectually stimulated in that way, away from the training again. And then when I come back, I do a bit more work and that sort of stuff. And then every day I have some sort of period where I do some sort of reading. It's usually literature. Sometimes it's research reviews. Like, I really like the mass research review that Greg Nuckols and those guys do. I think it's just a good little sweep that I can get through when I'm time poor. And I'll just try and spend a bit of time reading that. It used to be 1 to 2 hours a day, but these days it's more like maybe 20 to 30 minutes, something like that. And then the afternoon's free, basically. I like to spend a bit of time reading fiction. So I think that is another thing that is, again, intellectually stimulating, but it's unrelated to fitness. It's like, I think when you read good fiction, it actually gives you another way of looking at the world and another way of thinking, and I think that makes me a much more well-rounded person. So that's something that I think is really important to how I've kind of turned out, and it maybe gives me a bit of perspective in, like, you know what, if someone's trying to argue with you on the internet, it doesn't really fucking matter, does it? So I suppose my day's kind of scattered with work at the moment because I can't get a really good solid block with my daughter, but there are some sort of intellectually stimulating pursuits that are sprinkled throughout that are kind of not directly fitness related, but I think that they make me improve myself, and it gives me something that I can carry over and a new perspective that I can carry over when I do look at literature or when I do make a post. I have better communication skills. I have a better way of looking at it, more perspective. And that's something that I really want to continue to try and do. Another thing that really helps is I live in Sweden, obviously, so there's a different way of looking at life. When you're learning the language and the cultural norms, then that gives you another perspective as well. And I feel like that's really helped me to communicate as well, which goes over into my Instagram. It goes over into how I program and how I talk to clients and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose the message is really like, I used to be very 100% focused on fitness and research, and just like that's all I fucking did all day. And I slowly realized that actually the more I develop myself as a person by having these other little activities sprinkled throughout, I don't lose any efficiency in what I do with my job and with learning more about fitness, but being a better person then actually makes that stuff even more effective somehow, which is pretty cool.
So hold on, because this is what I want to parse out. Was the diversification of interests a scientific pursuit, or was it like you just reached the end of fitness and you're like, yeah, dude, 3x10, 3x8, someone give me a beer. Okay, how can I fix this?
I think it's become more like that, to be honest. But originally, I think it was just because I'm curious. Like, I'm fucking curious about everything. So that's where it stemmed from. And yeah, I was one of those kids where at school, I basically barely tried, and I still did okay because I was like just interested in other stuff, I suppose. And so I think that's just kind of naturally part of my personality. But I do think as it's gone along, I've kind of been a bit more like, how much more does really learning about this fitness stuff actually make a better program at the end of the day for a client? Yeah, 3x10, dude, just get it done.
Is it difficult for someone who educates to adopt that? Because like we've all come to the other side of it. I think you've arrived there first, where you're just like, guys, no, this doesn't matter. Like that'll be an answer to a question. It's like, it doesn't matter. But as people who sell fitness education on the internet, I sometimes feel a little bit disingenuous, but it's almost like you need to walk through this to know when it does. And that's the important bit. Like, do you struggle with that sentiment of arriving at this place of like, yeah, 3x10, bilateral lat pull down, no single arm cable-y stuff. Like, do you struggle with that and then turning around and being like, well, hey, here's a way to learn about training so that you can arrive at the point where you realize that the majority of it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think that's been really hard because obviously when people come to people like us who do educate and have some sort of reputation in the industry, then like they're expecting something special, right? They're expecting some kind of secret knowledge that you've gained over time. And it's really difficult to communicate this to people, but it's kind of like if I make the decision to say, yeah, no changes to your diet this week, or yeah, no changes to the exercise, keep doing the 3x10 lat pull down, there's just as much experience and decision making that goes into that as there is to saying, yeah, now we're going to do this special exercise thing, or we're going to do something weird and wacky with your nutrition. You're going to go low carb for 2 days, and then on the third day, halfway through your workout, you're going to start loading carbs, blah, 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 blah. The decision-making process is the same, Right. And I think that's so difficult to communicate to people. When you say it doesn't matter to someone, you're basically potentially like simulating 1,000 different scenarios in which, how could this potentially matter? No, actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter. And then you say to them, it doesn't matter. And it kind of feels low effort, right? To them. It almost feels like it would be more special if you said, well, here's how you can use this magic information in a particular situation. So yeah, I do struggle with that a lot. Because I think of the expectation. So it's a fine line. And so I think what I'm trying to do with content and stuff is to kind of be like, hey, this stuff might matter in some specific contexts, and here's like theoretically why and how it might matter. But in practice, like most of the time, this is what's really going to happen, right? And hopefully that leaves people saying like, oh, okay, cool. There is this other stuff out there that's theoretically better, but in practice doesn't really matter that much. That's been difficult to arrive at, but I think the longer you go through the industry and the more confidence you gain in what you're saying and the tireder you get of the bullshit, like the easier it is to just be like, it doesn't fucking matter, man. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I guess two things to that. I agree entirely with you, Luke, because I'm the same way. Like, I'll look at most things and be like, just do the same. You know what I mean? Like, is it the heaviest dumbbell in the gym? No. Okay, continue. Like, I probably gave you that dumbbell press 6 weeks ago because it was the best dumbbell press to give you. I didn't change my mind now because you've done it for 6 weeks. But I think, like you're saying, like, you have to synthesize 1,000 things to be able to answer that question anyways. Like, you're doing the same amount of work, but I think it takes more knowledge to distill it down to the simple thing. Like, if all of us here arrive at like, hey, pronated straight bar lat pull down for 3 sets of 10 is going to grow your lats, it's because I know so much more about how hypertrophy or strength is created that I know this will do that. Whereas the less I know, I'm seeking a very specific intervention. And the second thing I think about, like, you play guitar, I play guitar. We have very similar daily schedules. Like, I play guitar 3 hours a day between calls, like 15, 20, 25 minutes at a time. I learn 2 languages a day, try to at least. But it's like in phrasing, like when you hear a native, like someone from Sweden who's native to Sweden speaking versus probably how you initially spoke Swedish, or how I try and speak Spanish, or how I played guitar at the beginning, there's a beauty in the phrasing of something where you use less words, which is the opposite of how I'm explaining this idea I have now, because I'm trying to think of it as I do it. And that's essentially like the novice workout, is they're understanding how the bicep works as they train the bicep. So they do 12 things to get the bicep trained, where if you understand all the words that exist, it's like, yeah, this is the colloquialism for growing the bicep. Just go do that. Everyone will know what you mean, right? So I think there's nuance in that. Like, no one's going to argue B.B. King isn't a good guitar player, but he plays 1/3 the notes Eddie Van Halen ever did. You know, I think there's a nuance to phrasing.
Well, it's the same with, like,
Absolutely,
I think of
that.
computer programming like that, right? Like we had a software engineer in the next room over, just like writing lines of code. But, you know, people might be like, oh man, our thing has a couple 100,000 lines of code. It's like, it's not an indicator of quality, right? Like you could be using too much to do what like a few lines could do. Like he specifically writes in a code called, or not a code language, but a coding style called generics. So he can package things and place them in different tools and bots and widgets and these things that he can just put all over. It's like, oh no, I just use the same thing that we use for the buy button on the landing page for the subscribe button. It's really the same thing. And I think of that, yeah, it's there's a phrase from Michelangelo, who made David. It's beauty is the purgation of superfluidities. It's like the rock is there, you just have to whittle it away. You don't need to add a bunch of shit to it. And at some point, the guy took the chisel and hammer and went, it's done.
I think that's what it is, right? There's like, you could have an idiot or a genius, right? You could have a person who doesn't know how to play guitar and a person who knows how to play guitar. All of the frets exist on both guitars, but it's the guy who knows what frets to choose, right? There's not more or less frets for either individual. It's the choice of frets that matter, right? The choice of notes you play. And I think, you know, for me, that's like, I arrived at fitness from not giving a shit about fitness. Like, I wanted to be super skinny and grow my hair long and look like Brandon Boyd from Incubus and not lift weights, you know? And then I arrived at fitness as the 4th interest I had, and it took up the remaining quarter of my brain power to do it. And I think, like you're saying now, it's all the other interests allow me to think of fitness differently.
Yeah. I love that that analogy with the guitar stuff, because it makes perfect sense to me. It's like the classic trying to overplay things to sound impressive to someone, whereas if you just play the perfect little connection of notes over the right sort of chords, it just sounds beautiful, and you can't replace that. It's so true. And I think that, I mean, generally applies to everything. I think one of the things I've really enjoyed around content creation, it is sort of forced me to whittle away all of that extra shit so I can just get the message across, because obviously the attention span and the lack of nuance and all this sort of stuff on Instagram is there, and it's always going to be there. If anything, it's only going to get worse. And so you have to find a way to deliver a message that is as clear as possible with as few words as possible, so that you can just deliver the essence of this idea. And it's actually a challenge that I've really enjoyed because of what you were saying. So it's a cool analogy.
Well, I'd be interested in that process of content creation, like, you know, because it's not like, oh, I have this picture of me, I'm going to put it up. It's like very thought out. And how does that process start? Because, like, it's one thing it's a question I field a lot, is like, oh, do you manage your own Instagram? It's like, yeah, do people not? But it's like, I could see where this is like a part of your job, right? And it for me, it's become procedural. Like, it's a block of work that I have to set aside and be like, okay, Like, what is the current and desired state of the avatar of the audience that I have? And I do think about it in this level, like someone is in a current state. What is their desired state? How can I provide value with whatever this is? They're unmotivated, they want to be motivated. They're weak, they want to be strong. They're small, they want to be big. They're injured, they want to be healthy. What is your process when it comes to, because yours is way more laborious. Like, you have footnote citations in your social media posts. What's the process for you in going through from like inception of idea to hitting publish or send or whatever the hell?
Yeah, so I tend to get ideas just randomly, and I think what I described before, where I do other stuff and I have space for those things to happen serendipitously, is really important for that creative process. Not to like overstate it. I mean, when I say creative process, I mean, fuck, it's a social media post, but you know, the idea remains. And so if I get some kind of idea like, oh, this might be something, I'll have it in a big note on my phone kind of thing, wherever I'm out or whatever. And so when I want to create content, it is the same idea of what you were saying, trying to figure out like some sort of avatar, like what are they thinking? What is their problem? What do they need solved? That kind of thing. And I really find that is the most challenging part, because it's almost like, no, not what I think needs solving for them. What do they actually need solved? And what language do they actually use? Not what language do I think they use, which is really difficult, right? So I think about it in those terms, and then I'll kind of sketch it out, because the most common post I do is like this carousel type post, right, where I got 10 slides and then I got the caption. And I used to be like, oh, sweet, I got 10 slides. I can put tons of information in there. And now I'm like, if I can take this and kind of boil it down to like one key point that I'm trying to make, like one sentence, and then somehow have that sentence almost go over 10 slides and a caption, then that's what I want. And I've kind of learned that over time. So that's what I try and do, is like, do I have one key thing that I'm trying to say? So, okay, the topic might be training volume, but what am I actually trying to say about training volume in a short sentence? And then that becomes the post, right? So there is always going to be some information that I need to introduce to the audience, because you have to think about where are they at and where are they trying to go, like you mentioned. Which necessarily means that you're cutting some people out because they're not going to have the requisite knowledge to follow your train of thought or whatever, and that's fine. And so then I just try and make it a simple flowing idea from start to finish that way, and hopefully it provides enough value that people can take it straight away and start using it practically immediately. Now, not every single post is like that. I think there are different types of posts that you can make. Like you said, some of them are a little bit more esoteric. They've got the footnotes, they've got the citations and that kind of thing. And sometimes it's like, hey, this is kind of how I visualize training to failure or whatever. Like, you start to get to a point where these reps get really effective. And so I can visualize that by like, here's 10 blocks. It represents 10 reps. The blocks get redder as they get towards the 10th rep. You know what I mean? As they get redder, they start to get more effective in terms of motor unit recruitment. Like, that's a concept that I kind of came up with, and I was like, all right, cool. It's essentially the effective reps model, right? But that's something that I can turn into a post, and I can have people go along with me with that. So that's kind of the process, but the way that it differs from how I used to do things was that there used to be so much more. I try and explain every situation, all these different contexts, etc. And now I just kind of cut back as much as I possibly can. Like, I have this phrase that I repeat in my head, this mantra that is just kill another word, kill another word, kill another word. Like, get rid of every word you possibly can until you're left with the fewest possible words. And that's what I'm trying to aim for. And then inevitably you're going to get questions, what about this, what about that? But that's fine. You can answer some of those questions, but like, it's just so much more effective. And I saw the engagement and everything go up when I did that, because now people can actually follow with you along that thought process.
Do you ever look to other mediums to let those words have their day? Like, obviously podcasts are I don't want to use the word longer winded, but they're more in depth. They're in more in-depth looks into things. Like, have you ever considered exploring like YouTube more in depth or podcast more in depth so that you can scratch that itch, or do you like the challenge of that distillation process?
I really enjoy the challenge of the distillation. I actually enjoy it above anything else that I do right now. But that itch is still there, and I am I tend to be long-winded. I like the detail and all that sort of stuff. Especially, I used to be a lot more like that. And so, yeah, the podcasts and YouTube and blog posts and emails and all this sort of stuff definitely do allow me to go into a bit more depth. But I think the same idea remains in that I want to just cut back all of the unnecessary shit. And I also had this concept of like how deep do you want to go versus how wide do you want to go? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to be on Instagram and that's going to be my primary platform, I should probably go like 80% in on that or 90%. And then, yeah, okay, I've got an email list. I've got a podcast, that sort of stuff. But I think that trying to spread yourself too thin over a lot of different platforms kind of starts to water down how deep you can go on one particular platform. So I have that thought as well, because I'm not someone who... I like efficiency. Like I like being productive and I like being efficient. And I find if I can really focus on one or two platforms, then I can drive that message as best as I possibly can. But like I said, I think I've just developed now to thinking that the sort of, not so much brevity, but I suppose just efficiency of getting the message across is something that is really enjoyable to try and pursue. So I'm trying to get better at that. And I find a lot of pleasure in that, to be honest.
No, from a fitness perspective, what topics of late that are more detail oriented have caught your interest?
I think definitely the argument around training to failure for hypertrophy purposes, strength as well. I think that's interesting, but training to failure, very, very interesting to me. And I think it's a really interesting intersection between the theory and the mechanisms and what you do in practice. Because we can sort of wank about all of the theory and stuff, like where is failure occurring? Are we talking about issues with, voltage sensors on the sarcoplasmic reticulum? Are we talking about sensitivity of the myofibrils? Are we talking about reuptake of calcium into the sarcoplasmic reticulum? Are we talking about release of enzymes that are damaging the sarcolemma? Are we talking about like sensations going back to CNS fatigue? There's so much interesting stuff in that that can contribute to fatigue. That can then mean, okay, we're not getting as much motor unit recruitment, we're inducing more muscle damage, we're therefore unable to do as much training volume over time. So do we need to go to failure or not? But at the end of the day, it's kind of like most people don't really train hard enough. So I probably wouldn't err on the side of like, let's go to failure or at least very close, just to ensure that people actually train hard enough, right? So I think it's intellectually a very interesting area to look at. And then the way that you implement it, practically speaking, I think is like what makes it super interesting. So that's kind of what I've been diving deep on and something that I think about a lot with my own training, because I want to make it as efficient as I can as well.
Do you have any preliminary thoughts on like a mechanistic bottleneck that would constitute failure?
I think like a lot of the stuff that when you go to failure, especially when you do it with higher rep sets and with shorter rest periods, longer duration exercise in general, there seems to be a lot of factors that sort of contribute to an increase in muscle damage, and that muscle damage can then cause central fatigue as well. And that potentially means that, hey, if I'm squatting a ton and I like doing my 20 rep sets trying to emulate Tom Platz, I could be kind of fucking up my ability to progress my bench press because I'm generating all of this central fatigue. And so maybe I can still train my squats super hard, but I can do it under different parameters. Maybe I can do it with lower rep sets. Maybe my warm-up sets can have longer rest periods in between, this kind of stuff. It's all a little bit theoretical, but I've also been looking at like how close to failure do we really need to go to maximize hypertrophy? And I'm talking like genuine failure here. I'm not talking about like we got a bunch of untrained people in and we said volitional failure, so they gave up like when they weren't even anywhere near actual failure. I'm talking like if we go to genuine failure, is that actually better than going, say, 2 reps short? And can we avoid that CNS fatigue I just spoke about by doing that? And I think we possibly can. I think there's some research emerging now that's showing that if you get within sort of 2-ish reps of failure, you're probably getting all of the hypertrophic stimulus that you need, and you're maybe avoiding a little bit of that extra fatigue by going all the way to failure. That's predicated on the fact that people genuinely know how to go to failure, and they actually can stay within 2 reps of failure. But that's kind of where I'm at the moment, and so I'd be interested to see if there's more data that comes out on that. And then from a strength perspective, we probably have, there's definitely advantages of getting pretty close, but I think also you want to think about how much productive work can I do at maximum velocity, which necessarily means you don't want to get too close to failure too often, because that's lower velocity work than if you're doing sort of more moderate distances from failure. So I think there's a bunch of different ways that we could think about stuff, which is interesting to me, and I'm waiting on more data to see. And in practice, it basically means like, okay, does this person know how to train to failure? If they don't, then my primary goal is actually to teach them how to do that. So I program fucking RPE 10s for people on their first set so that they know what that feels like. And then, okay, now maybe we can do some RPE 8 or 9 work, because you know that you can get 20 reps with this weight. Okay, you can't just do your 8 to 10. So fucking put the weight up, and then we'll do some RPE 8, some genuine ones, and then you're going to get a massive response from that. And then we don't need to go as high with the volume and all that sort of shit. So that's where I'm at the moment with it.
Do you ever wish you didn't know any of this? Like, do you see the ignorance is bliss when you walk around the gym and you're like, God, that must be so nice?
Listen, when I was doing 5x5 or starting strength or whatever, man, I fucking loved training. I just got in and got after it. It was wicked.
Do you ever have anyone take over your programming?
No. So I do all of it myself. But I think this is the problem, is like I get people apply for coaching, and like we get into the first training program and it's like, yeah, this is a third of the volume you used to do, because you don't need all of this superfluous bullshit. And actually this program is still working really well for you after 8 weeks. We don't need to change shit just because we need to change it. Yeah. So, you are obviously looking at the personal preferences and the enjoyment and the engagement of the client. That's very important. But at the same time, I do struggle a little bit with like, you know what, we can pare this back and it's actually going to work better.
Do you ever question your own training methods with your own training? Like, this is something I struggle with, and I just go to him and tell him what to do. And it's so nice to see the same thing on the same, like I look at it like a roulette wheel. I remember being on a roulette wheel. Caesar's Windsor, Lundy, the producer you can't see right now, and me and him are from the same hometown and had the same. Well, I had a gambling affliction. Not too bad. I didn't go to meetings or anything. But I remember sitting at a table. It was a roulette wheel. And, like, I don't know, red 19 or whatever the hell came up twice in a row. And someone next to me was losing their mind. Not because they won any money, but they just couldn't believe it. I was like, what? It's the same likelihood every single time.
Yeah.
The probability is, well, probability and likelihood are slightly different. But, like, it's like she couldn't believe it. I was like, what? It's is equally likely thing to occur as doubles or, like, fucking black 14 or whatever. And she's like, oh, my God. And I was like, oh, man. But it's like with training, it's the same thing. It's like, what does that spin of the wheel every week going to yield? It's okay for it to, it could be black 19 again. Okay, it's black 19. Great. Then spin the wheel again and see what you got next week. So it's something that I struggle with getting in my own head of being like, oh, like, was there enough proximity to failure? Was it failure? He goes, no, you're a bitch. Do this. I'm like, okay, thank you. Like, do you ever struggle with that side of like, or even just doubting yourself coming out of a training session? Like, man, I only had 40 minutes. Should I have done RDLs rather than deficits, or should I have done snatch grip? Do you play with that at all in your head?
Massively, man, which is why I have to write all my shit down before I go to the gym, because then I'll get in there and I'll be like, oh, no, wait, yeah, maybe I could do deficits today. And then that will mean that on Thursday I'll have to change this, So, yeah, I write it down and I always remember, like, fucking just strip it back, man. Just strip it back. It'll be fine. Work hard. Like, that's the easiest way to just not overcomplicate it and then cause that like domino effect of like, oh wait, but if I do this, then I want to do this and this to compensate for that or to account for it, and so it goes.
So you just try and kill the words in your own programming.
Kill the words in your own program. Massively. I think like just in life in general, I'm starting to learn that, like, just strip it back into the basic shit. It's like, okay, we were talking about the guitar before. You'll know if you've ever picked up an instrument how fucking difficult it is to get really good at it. and you're always looking for some hack, some trick. Oh, you know, when I play fucking minor pentatonics, this is what I try and do if we're, you know, whatever. And it's like, you know what? Tom Morello said it really well. When he was a kid, he just fucking locked himself in his room over his summer holidays for 10 hours a day, and he just fucking played for 10 hours every single day. That's why he's good at guitar. It's not because he knows some trick, man. It's because he just fucking did it.
Yeah, and I feel like...
That's what I go for.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Like, I've just settled. And then, too, it's like Tom Morello, like, name any guitar player. As good as they are, like, a lot of them are iconic because when you hear them, you know who they are because of what they do. And it's like, not only did they just get really good at it, but they got really good at doing that thing. And no one's coming out with a new album that sounds completely different. You know, Tom Morello's not going to be Marty Friedman tomorrow. And it's like, no one gets that reference. But the same thing with my training. It's like, no, I just got good at like these 6 things. I'm not trying anything new. It's the same thing when I go to a restaurant. I love food. I'm not eating salmon. Like, I know I like steak, and I'll eat a cooler steak. I'm not trying anything new. I'm not wasting that meal on something. When I come to the gym, I don't have any anxiety about doing the same thing because I also don't want to waste my precious 45 minutes in the gym on an exercise that might not feel great. So I'm just totally. Like, now just do the same thing again. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. I see the same thing with, like, I'll get a ton of people come in for coaching, right? And they'll go, yeah, I want to look like this person on Instagram. And it's like, okay, so you're trying to copy what they're doing or what they're putting up on their social media? Is that what you're telling me? And they're like, yeah, like more or less. And it's like, but you're never going to look like them. Like, you've got your own look. Why don't you just fucking go for that, right? And find what works well for you and what you like. And they're like, oh, shit, I never thought of that. Like, they're never going to look like me.
Yeah. That's the idea about novelty on social media, right? Because novelty works, but it doesn't work long term, right? So people have this idea, they see these novel things on Instagram or wherever it might be, and they think that just because it works short term, that's the answer, as opposed to having someone like you that can distill that process down with experience and say, actually, this is a long-term solution, even though you might get some results, or like the keto thing, like I lost 12 pounds in a week. Yeah, because you're not eating carbohydrates and you're not retaining water anymore. But if you're doing some, you know, single arm lat whatever, and it feels different than the 3x10 lat pull down that you've been doing your entire life, there's going to be some novelty there. And then that's going to say, oh, this is the missing link. When really, the way I think of it is that there's no missing link. There's no secret that hasn't been discovered that is just the secret to your training that's going to fix everything, because everyone would already be doing it.
See, I think you're wrong because you just have it named an exercise after yourself like a douchebag.
You're right.
I think you should. So there is something new if you decide that your last name fits great in front of the name of the exercise.
It's the douchebag curl where you punch yourself in the face with the dumbbell.
That's where this is headed, man. Yeah, like I love the idea that, you know, like without sounding like all of our mothers, it's like, oh yeah, like you have your own unique look, Jordan. Like you'll develop your own side tricep pose. But like that message lands way better when it comes from him. Why? Because there's 7 guys in this gym that I sometimes look, I feel like I'm looking in the mirror. It's like, is that, oh wait, no, that's not me. That's not a mirror. That's just another fucking high fade, big beard guy that takes a bunch of whatever. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I don't have a... But the guy who's like, I live in Sweden by choice, and I play guitar, drink beer, and walk in a field all day. It's like, this guy's one of one. He's minted. I'm going to listen to him because he's not just towing the company line. And also, he's low-key shredded and smarter than everyone on the internet.
Too kind, as I always say. Too kind.
No, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you re-emerging back into the social media space. I hope the crypto king that stole your account and is selling Finex trading secrets, or whatever the fuck is going on with your original account, gives it back. I hope his Luna coin takes a shit and he jumps off a building or whatever happened to your account. But it's nice to have you back. It's great to see you again. I can't believe it's been so many years since Sydney. Hopefully cross paths at some point. I know, last time we were together, we did the in-person seminar. I hope you personally get back on the road and start doing in-person stuff again. That was probably the most fun I've had collaborating with another presenter. And yeah, dude, if you're ever out in this neck of the woods, You know where to find us, guys. Luke, now your new Instagram handle, so people know where to find you. And we're gonna record an intro for this, and we push that so you kind of get back to where you were.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a ton. The new one is at Coach Luke Tulloch. So that's a new one. And yeah, thanks a ton. I really appreciate you guys having me on and, letting me talk about my not so interesting take on things. Yeah, just do the basics, bro. But yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Awesome, man.
Very
We'll
much.
see you soon.
Absolutely.